So guys, it's Drew here. I'm doing my first video blog from a computer. Sorry if the quality is off. I've never actually done this before from a computer, but I'm doing it from a computer this time. So anyway, let's get started. Today I wanted to talk about activism, and the reason why I want to talk about activism today is because I believe in the last 2 to 3 years that this has become a real issue, and it's involved people of all walks of life. It's feminists, it's transgenders, it's people of different races. It's everybody from every walk of life that this kind of thing is just pulling everybody into it. Okay, and I want to start also by saying that um, activism in itself as a means to an end is not necessarily a bad thing. What's bad is activist culture. When activism becomes a way of life, that's what's bad, because it's not healthy for a human being, let alone groups of human beings, to be in a perpetual state of conflict. And I'm talking about violent dissension, conflict that undermines security, peace, and stability constantly. It's not healthy. And I mean, if you look at, for example, the cultures that are constantly associated with struggle and that are constantly associated with issues and conflict, like the black culture in America, for example, it makes it very difficult for followers of that culture, for members of that culture, people who decide to emulate that culture. It makes it very difficult for people like that to integrate into society, because activism is really a tool for change. But when activism becomes a culture, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of negativity, because it's like you make it difficult for somebody to integrate into society through activism. And now, because that person can't integrate into society, now they start a new activist cause and they keep going and going and going. Okay? Now, this activist culture has been really sucking in the younger generation. There's a couple of people, that are older millennials, like in my age range, that have been sucked into this. They had promising careers ahead of them, and they wanted to do a lot of things. And a lot of these people that had ambitions to become successful and so forth, as early as like maybe 6 years ago, have completely changed their tune. Now I see those same people, constantly getting involved in activism. I guess it's their way of feeling important because they're not really doing anything with their lives. I'm not knocking activism. I'm knocking activist culture, because take, for example, I mean, Black American culture. Okay. And let me just, before I even go further into this, actually, let me just state, you know, I'm not talking down to anybody when I'm stating these things. I'm really not. Okay. You know my background. I was my parents immigrated here legally the right way. They became extremely productive members of society. Um, I was educated very well. I went to a good high school. I went to a pretty decent college. I have a great career. I'm pretty successful for my age, and you know, my parents, you know, they're Nigerian, and there's no slavery in my history. I still maintain my African last name. Um, I don't say that to say that I'm better than anybody, but I just want to express that you can choose your culture. I want to show that you can do that. Just because I'm a black male that's in America and has been here since birth because I was born here, it doesn't mean that I had to absorb what's promoted to us by the mainstream media. I was raised differently. I was raised to be a certain way, and I haven't absorbed I haven't absorbed the mainstream media culture that's pushed on us and that's expected of us. So um, I believe in certain activist causes. I believe in what Irwin Schiff does. Irwin Schiff, what he did, sorry, because he passed away. But I believe in the cause that he fought for. Basically, was really not even a fight against taxes, but really the fight to be able to keep what you earn. You know, um, Irwin Schiff was all about that fight, and I feel like that is like the most basic kind of activism you can have because let's face it, I mean, if you're part of a corporation or a system and more you can't even control how much of what you keep from what you earn, then how different is it from slavery? So that's a good question. So activist culture, I really believe, has been extremely detrimental, especially to minorities lately, because when you come from a different culture or when you're not of the majority, you already have trouble integrating into society. So when you see, George Soros, these other billionaires who have already made it and have integrated well into society, funding Black Lives Matter, you have to ask yourself an honest question. And the honest question would be, why would somebody that's so successful spend so much money, you know, inciting and making 12% of the population become rabid and threatening against the majority? You know, does that billionaire want the 12% to experience more hardship and harder ability to integrate? I mean, these are questions I ask myself because on the right side, I see the Koch brothers who are really conservative and libertarian billionaires. I see the Koch brothers, they donated money, but they didn't donate money to protest groups. They donated 25 million to HBCUs. So they donated 25 million to education. You see what I'm saying? Like, and then you have leftists, you have like George Soros, he's donating money to destruction and dissension. So it's like you have to think about, what causes you stand for and what causes you follow. You can't just I know the title of the group Black Lives Matter is meant to make you say, "Oh, of course, well, I'm black, of course Black Lives Matter." It's meant to draw you in. It's called marketing, okay? It's meant to make you do that, but it doesn't mean that that's exactly what the group does. And liberals have really mastered political marketing because they understand how to title things and how to make things. For example, they don't call illegal immigrants illegal immigrants anymore. They call them undocumented. They change words. Like they change, for example, they no longer call global warming. They call it climate change. They change words because words mean something from what you say. They don't say it anymore. They don't say, for example, that you're killing a potential child or a potential baby, for example. I'm not saying whether I'm for or against abortion because that's a whole other argument. But I'm not saying whether I'm for or against. But they're not saying you're killing your potential child. They say that right to choose. They change words. That's my point. What I'm trying to say. They change words and they do it a lot. Okay, so you got to think about these things. Just because a group is titled Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean that they're promoting the best, the best interests of people who are black or people who are in the black community or people who identify with the black community. It doesn't necessarily have to be black people. There are plenty of white people, Asian people, people from all walks of life that relate to and that perpetuate Black American culture. Okay, but just because a group is titled a certain way, it doesn't mean that group is for your best interest. So anyway, like I was saying, activist culture makes it very difficult to integrate. And, all these college kids and youngins that get caught up in this kind of a thing, it's easy for them to do that because you know what? They can just write off everybody as racist and choose their friends and choose their cliques. But when they grow up and when they finally realize that they have to actually integrate into society and work with people and seek employment from people and deal with people from all kinds of all walks of life, they may have wished that they read Trump, The Art of the Deal. They may have wished that they read Anthony Robbins or Tony Robbins. They may have wished they read 48 Laws of Power. You know what I mean? A lot of these people, these youngins and these people that get caught up in activism, they're simply just exposing themselves to the wrong kinds of information. And I'm not saying that knowing a history of slavery and knowing what went on in this country is a bad thing. I know the injustices that went on in history. I'm aware of them. But what I don't do and what I don't believe in doing is constantly reminding yourself of them, especially to the point where it affects your daily life negatively and makes you suspicious and paranoid and makes it difficult for you to integrate with society because these things really subtly affect your mentality. You know what I mean? When you're constantly reading books that subtly reinforce to your subconscious that you're not accepted because of how you look or what you were born as, you're constantly all you're doing is breeding insecurity. Okay, and there's a lot of people who think that they're enlightened and that they're awake, but they're not comfortable in their own skin. So it's like if you're so enlightened because you know so much black pain theology and so much black pain theory, why are you not comfortable in your own skin? You see what I'm saying? I would follow a lot of you activists and maybe I would listen to some of you guys if you didn't come off as so insecure and so paranoid. Okay, just because you are animated and just because you're upset, it doesn't make you more accurate. Do you know why I'm so comfortable? Because I understand numbers and statistics. That's why. Because I understand that, regardless of what the media shows me, if the data shows me that something is less than a 1% chance of occurring, I know that I know I can relax a little bit. I know there's still a chance, but I know I can relax because in a majority of outcomes, it's just not likely to occur. I've discussed this on my videos before. That's why I'm relaxed. And then I have people say to me all the time, "Oh, your time is coming. Just cross the wrong red light or drive without your seatbelt one day. Your time is coming." Okay. I will say this: maybe in certain areas there's a higher concentration, which raises your probability of experiencing such things. But with where I live and with where my life is, I'm almost never going to come into conflict with these things. A little profiling here or there, a little prejudice here or there, everybody experiences it. I don't care if you're black, white, Chinese, whatever. Everybody experiences it. But the kind of violent uh, um, you know, stuff. I don't think I'm going to experience that. Okay. Now, also, I'd like to mention the KKK and that group, for example. I really think that that group is funded by the Democrats. I think they're on the Democrats' payroll, and that's because anytime a popular conservative starts trending during an election cycle, whether it's Ron Paul or now Donald Trump, I just find it funny how like a KKK leader comes out and just lends their support. They give their endorsement. I find that very strange. I think that they're paid by Democratic or leftist operatives to do that. And it's exactly the kind of thing that leftist and liberal, operatives would do. They that's what they run on because they put people into categories. And without placing people into categories and treating people as individuals, they can never amass the support that they do. Once people start identifying with more so groups than as individuals, that's when you'll see people basically amassing and running over to the Democrat liberal side. But once people start seeing themselves and valuing themselves as individuals again, you'll start seeing them move a little bit over to the libertarian, conservative side, which is where that's where I am. But people see themselves as part of groups, and at the end of the day, it's hard for us individuals out here. It really is. It's hard for us, us people who, really spend time, developing ourselves and don't just see ourselves as part of or assimilated as part of a group. I see myself as an American citizen. I'm part of many different groups I choose to be part of for outcomes that I choose to go after. But, at the end of the day, I still have my own individual identity. There's a lot of people who don't have that. So that's pretty much it. I think activist culture is very, very, very damaging to minorities in general. And I think if we can, I think it needs to be a means to an end. I think it needs to end it. Do not teach your children this kind of culture. It's not going to help them move forward in life. Don't spread this to your friends and your family. It's not going to help them move forward in life. The best thing that you could do, if you really feel underprivileged, if you really feel at a disadvantage, the best thing that you could do is succeed is succeed despite all odds, and share your wealth with who you want to share it with. That's the best thing you can do. Share your resources with who you think really deserves them and who you think really needs the uplifting. That's the best thing you can do. But to spread this negative, divisive, and debilitating activist culture, no, I think it's useless, and I think it's very damaging. Anyway, that's it. This is probably my longest video. Wow, 15 minutes. I can't believe you guys listened that long. But anyway, I'm out. You guys have a wonderful night and take care.